What I'm going to do real quick, I'm going to go over some housekeeping. If for any reason we always value audience participation. So if you have a question that you want to ask, even if it was one you already posed before today's session, please feel free to come off mute and ask. Put it in the Zoom chat if you'd prefer. If you come off mute, you will be visible on the recording, and we're also live streaming to our website. So if you have privacy concerns, not a problem. You can still participate. Just put it into the Zoom chat, and I'll make sure to raise any questions you have. And if you'd like to ask a question but remain anonymous, then just send the question to me, to Meg, instead of to everyone on the drop down in the Zoom chat box. Last thing, please remain on mute unless you're actively talking, but you are more than welcome to come off of mute to ask questions or comment. The only thing we do ask is if you do come off mute, try not to interrupt anybody but me. I am fair game. I get paid to fill the silence. So please interrupt me if you have questions or comments that you'd like to ask of Christina. So Christina, would you like to introduce yourself so everybody can kind of get more of an idea of who you are and what you do for PowerToFly?
Sure. Thank you, Meg. And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here on a Friday morning. And it's great to have members of my team on the line, too. I'm Christina Duke. I'm the head of sales. I've been at PowerToFly for over 3 years now. Started my career as an HR practitioner before moving into SaaS implementation and eventually found my way to sales and to PowerToFly.
Awesome. And actually, Christina is one of the few PowerToFly team members I've actually met in person. We got to work together at an event in Seattle last year, which was really fun. So it's pretty great for me to get to reconnect with her. So let's get started with some of the questions that y'all had asked. One of the ones that kind of came up a lot, this person had written in asking, are you using video conferencing more or less? Any guidelines for when it's better to lay off of video? Zoom fatigue is real, but the personal touch is so important to so many sales deals.
Yeah, it's interesting because PowerToFly is an all remote company. So we have been using video conferencing since day one, and it's, ingrained in like our day-to-day work. What I'm finding though is, the short answer is like, we've already been using it. What I'm finding though, it's interesting is the shift that we're seeing with our clients and them getting used to video conferencing. Zoom fatigue is definitely very real. What I found, actually, I don't know if y'all are familiar with a tool called Gong. We just purchased it, but it essentially records your video calls. And it was a little scary to watch at first because I usually come on camera the whole time because to that point about personal touch, right? You want to have that face-to-face interaction. And I'm like touching my face. I'm, furrowing my brow, and I realized, wow, like there's a lot of like behaviors that I'm exhibiting that may actually detract from the sale in certain ways if they're seeing me act like this. And so the rule that I've kind of been following is if the client or the prospect comes on camera, I'm definitely going to come on camera and have that interaction with them. Sometimes they don't, right? Because again, people are still making this shift and getting used to it. And what I'd like to do at the beginning of the call is at least come on camera then to say hello, show them that I'm a real person, let them see my face, and then go off camera and have that conversation like via kind of a typical phone interaction, and maybe mitigate some of those things that I was talking about, touching my face, making a weird facial expression. And sometimes I've just found like I can even feel more confident too if I'm just with the audio.
That's a really good point. And I like how you framed it as like a kind of let the client set the tone a little bit. But you're right. I mean, when I started doing hosting, I didn't really watch back any of my recordings because I was already in that chat. So I didn't really think about it until a couple months ago when I pulled up an old recording to send to someone and it started auto playing. And I realized like, oh God, my mom's right. I touch my hair way too much. Like it's one of those things that you don't really think about because you're kind of in the moment. So yeah, I think that's a really great tip to really think about what maybe like nonverbal cues you might be sending that you're not used to really having to think about on something like a phone call.
Yeah.
So thank you for calling that out.
Show your face at first too, but especially if your sales process involves like a demo or you're sharing something on your screen, they're not going to be looking at your face during that time anyway. So you can do a mix of kind of coming off and on camera.
Yeah. And that's a really good call out too, to kind of use like, presentations or something that you're going to share your screen as a good way to break that. If you don't have anything like that, do you usually just say like, I'm going to go off camera? Do you give a reason or anything, or how do you handle that? I'm just kind of curious.
I usually am like, hey, I'm going to come off or I'm going to come on camera, say hello. Feel free if you want to come on camera, no pressure. Then, usually they stay off camera and I'll say, okay, and I'm going to go back. I'm a real person. Just wanted you to see my face and say hi, and I'll go off camera to save bandwidth. Everybody's all about saving bandwidth these days.
Yeah, very smart. Okay, so the next question that we got asked is one that I think is kind of an evergreen question, especially when we've got people that maybe are not used to remote life and remote work. Are there any virtual sales tools that those of us new to the remote lifestyle should adopt to help aid the sales process?
Yes. And I want to call upon anybody that, especially my team that's on the line, but I know some of the tools that they swear by are like Calendly to help with meeting scheduling. I mentioned that we're using Gong now, which is helpful when it comes to recording the calls, transcribing the calls, and just taking notes, and even from a learning and development perspective of being able to go back and watch and listen to yourself. And Soapbox is actually another tool that I really like. It's a plugin for Chrome where you can actually record videos of yourself. So video seems to be a new trend, especially in prospecting and outbound outreach. But and we've also used video on LinkedIn too. No, team, are there any other tools besides those that y'all have been
guys, feel free to shout out, either come off mute if you'd like, or you can put them into the chat, whichever you prefer. But other tools that you guys are using, please feel free to sing out. When you're talking about using video, is that like in place of an email? You would send a video message or something, or is it like more of a addendum too?
Yeah, both. Video is great. Lydia's on the line. I think she's on the BDR team or biz dev team, and she's been experimenting with video just as like a pure cold outbound outreach. Hello, I'm Lydia from PowerToFly, elevator pitch, etc. And I think that's helpful. I've also used it too, right? If I'm sending a presentation to a prospect, or especially if I'm sending an order form or anything with pricing, like, hey, this quick video will run you through what I've put together for you.
That's super smart. And actually, that kind of dovetails really nicely into, let's see, let me try and find that question. There was another question that would really feed in well with this. Yeah, so somebody had asked, should we be rethinking the content of what we send out to customers or prospects at this time? And I know that there was a lot of talk about this like really early on during the pandemic, but I know that, there's also a lot more other things going on since then, from, racial justice protests to stuff about the upcoming election and that kind of thing, especially America centric. But are there any, like, what else, how do we put this? What other like kind of impacts or things should people maybe be considering when they're sending out information for prospects or clients?
Yeah, this was a good question. And I was thinking about it and how to answer it. When everything hit with the pandemic, and especially the reckoning that we're facing as a country, I think there was a lot of focus early on, and not to say that we've lost focus, but on interacting with empathy with your prospects and clients, and really leading with the human aspect. It's interesting, right? Because as salespeople, we're in a position where we're here to push, right? We push a product. Now, I truly believe in the value of our product and service, and that's great. And I hope as salespeople you do too, because it's always hard to sell something you don't believe in. And so there was this consternation about, oh my gosh, like with all the stuff that's going on, like I really don't want to be calling these people or emailing them about buying stuff and spending money when their businesses are tanking. And so we really turned the focus on acknowledging what was happening, right? And leading with empathy, understanding, doing your research up front, especially if you're prospecting to a company that may be struggling, and leading with that, but then also remaining confident in the value that our products and services bring.
So did you guys take any comfort in kind of the fact that, oddly enough, a lot of the curveballs that have been thrown our way, I feel like PowerToFly has been uniquely positioned to not really have to pivot that much to be able to address what's going on or what people's like more pressing needs might be. You know, when everybody was moving virtual, we we're like, we're old hat at this, we've got you, you know, come stick with us, we can help guide you through this. And then when it was all about, you know, diversity and inclusion, we were like, hey, you know, we've got great training programs, you can come to our chat and learn, you can come to this, come to that. Did you feel like that was more of an easy transition and an easy, you know, kind of shift for you and your program and you and your team to manage? Or do you feel like you were kind of in the same boat as a lot of people and having to kind of hold people's hands and move them through this?
The latter, actually, because, you know, we work with a lot of teams that are focused around hiring, right? They want to get more women on their team. And when business is slowing down and companies are facing things like layoffs and furloughs, right? Hiring comes to a halt. And then it really starts to focus on, okay, how can we make sure that the diverse talent and the women that you have at your companies stay there? And that's where we really had to focus the shift on what is the value that we're offering these prospects and what is their use case, making sure that we understand the new use cases that people are facing. And the other part of this too is that this whole shift to remote, that's actually something that I feel like we've really been able to help guide prospects and clients through, being an all remote company since we were founded in 2014. But I have had conversations, right, with people that are like, I just can't imagine like growing my team, or how am I supposed to hire people when I can't even have a face-to-face interview? And that has been actually a silver lining, lack of a better way to put it. And in my mind is we've actually are in a prime position to work with our clients to help them embrace and transition into this remote work lifestyle, because we've been doing it.
Absolutely.
But back to the content and how we reach out to clients. You know, it's interesting, right? We talked about things like using video, leading with empathy. I'm still a bit old school, right? In my sales approach, I, you know, still believe in cold calling, for example. But I think the interesting thing, right, is like, hey, now that people aren't in their offices, like, are those office lines redirecting to their mobiles? Or is it even appropriate to call somebody's like personal mobile phone if you have access to that data? And you know, I don't know. I think we're still kind of figuring some of that stuff out along the way. But I am a firm believer too, and you probably wouldn't know by my response here, in the old best practices, which is like clear, concise, direct communication. You know, if you're asking for someone's time, laying out an agenda of what you're going to talk about, very personalized, targeted outreach. Like, I don't think any of that has changed.
Yeah. All right. So we had a lot of questions about how people wanted to know how they can add value, because, you know, these interactions, especially if you're, you know, kind of maybe not in panic mode, but like going through like a lot of stuff with your own like sales pipeline and that kind of thing. A lot of these interactions feel kind of rushed, and it's very hard to be sincere and respectful when you're in a hurry or the person you're addressing might be in a hurry. Have you had any kind of shift in how you approach those conversations, or the kind of language that you use when trying to convey that empathy and convey that you know, understanding and respect to a client or a potential prospect?
Yeah, you know, I always err on the side of lead with professionalism, right? I think people that are newer to sales think it's a lot of schmoozing. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely value and there's definitely an aspect of rapport building with a prospect, right? But at the end of the day, we don't know each other. We're not friends. I hope we can get there. But what I find, especially when you're reaching out to like senior level people trying to get to budget and power, the more concise and direct you can be as to why you're reaching out and how you can help them, and leading with that is actually what opens the door to building that rapport, because you're showing that you're respecting their time and getting straight to the point of what they care about. And that involves like some research up front, right? You want to be looking at their LinkedIn, Googling them, all the things that I know we as salespeople know. So you have that in the background, right? And you can touch on those things. But I mentioned this earlier in the call too, right? If you're going to reach out and ask for somebody's time, bullet point 3 things out of like what you're going to talk about and why you're asking for their time. When you get on the phone, I'm calling because of XYZ. Like just get it out up front versus having to kind of make small talk. And what I found is like when you lead with that professionalism and you're showing that you respect their time and you're showing that you can help, that's actually what leads into the deeper relationship building where you start building rapport and maybe talking about some of these other things too.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the questions that got asked a couple of times prior to today's session, and I'm actually really interested because we had a similar question on a different sales office hours that was held like right at the start of the pandemic. What assumptions should we avoid making at this point as salespeople? I know that it can be really easy to kind of feel like your world is the world. So are there any, kind of high points to hit of like, don't assume fill in the blank because it's we're no longer in that same reality or in that same like version of normal for us?
Yeah, I liked this question because I don't think we should ever make any assumptions, actually. And it's something that I definitely remind my team about too and find myself doing. I'll go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but there's a book called The 4 Agreements. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. It changed my life and definitely made me a happier person. And it's just 4 simple agreements that if you can kind of live your life by them, you're guaranteed happiness, and it works. And the second one is don't make assumptions. And especially as salespeople, I find that when we start to make assumptions, that's actually when things start to go off the rails. So I'll give you an example. And Roz, I know you're on the line, but I'll give you an example of where I did this, right? I still do this myself, even, being in sales and leading the team. Had a call with a prospect. He's a CTO and co-founder. He has the budget. He has the power. He's said he's interested. He said he's going to sign by today. And in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm talking to the right person. He's confirmed he's going to sign. He gave me a deadline of what he's going to do. And I got off that call without booking a 15-minute closing call today. Have I heard back from this guy? No, I haven't. We know the best practices when it comes to a sales process, right? We need to ask the right questions. We need to book the follow-up calls. We need to make sure we understand the decision-making and approval process, all of those things. And I think it's very easy, even if you're a seasoned salesperson, to start making these assumptions. Oh, well, he's the right guy. He's in charge. He told me he could sign. He said he's interested. And we forget those basic best practices that then can come back and bite us in the end. So I actually tell my team, don't ever assume anything, because I hear a lot like, no, they really like us. They're very excited. We have no idea what's going to happen. We had another deal where we were like in procurement, talking to the woman. She was going to send it to legal. And then she ended up actually like leaving the company, right? We thought we were right there at the finish line. And we didn't even have a new point of contact. We had to go figure all that out. And so when we start assuming things, we start not asking the right questions. And that's a potential pitfall.
That's a really good way to put that, actually, to make sure that you're asking the right questions, because if it tells you something that you already knew, that's fine. But at least then for sure, like, yes, this is, the baseline that we have moving forward, but there's always something that you might not know about the situation. So I think that's a really good call out.
I'll go back actually to the question about like how to be sincere when people are feeling rushed. And I talked about, I actually think it's respectful when you're very direct, giving an agenda for their time, telling why they're reaching out. But I think actually a way that you show sincerity and that you care is by the nature of the questions that you ask and the diagnosis that you do. Because if you've done your homework, you know them, you have an idea of maybe where their pain points are, or you're speaking their language, right? And you know how to ask things that are relevant to them and what they care about. That's actually what shows your sincerity.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for circling back there. All right. So one of the questions that I thought was kind of interesting, and I don't know if it'll strictly apply because, like you said, like we've always been remote and it's just kind of a thing that we do. But this person had asked, if you're in a less remote or a hybrid role, what are the best ways to observe safety precautions for on-site visits or calls without offending people? And so I think like probably this is going to play into your question or your answer about video chatting and kind of deferring to the client. But I'm kind of interested to see what you would think about this.
Well, this is great. And please, I know we've had a little bit of interaction on the chat, but please feel free to come off mute. I know there's a lot of my team members here. I actually want to turn it back to the audience, because even on a personal level, like going out and seeing friends and family, sometimes I don't even know what the protocol is, right? I'm like going in for a handshake, a hug, and then I'm like, I don't even know how to act. And frankly, what I do is I say that out loud and I'm like, oh, this is weird. I don't know what to do. I'm so happy to see you, but I want to be respectful. So I don't know. Does anybody on the line want to talk about like how they're handling this actually in like face-to-face interactions?
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Feel free to come off mute if you've got thoughts. I know that personally, so I've never held a sales position, but in a past life, I was the person that salespeople would call on. And so I think that in situations, granted that was way pre-pandemic, but I know that like how I dealt with salespeople then was kind of, I got deferred to because I was a customer. And so I think like within reason, letting the customer kind of set the tone for what they're comfortable with, what they're not, but also, you know, developing kind of a baseline for yourself. So like maybe you walk into a situation where nobody in the office is wearing masks, but you'd feel more comfortable in one. I don't think it's really that big of a deal to just call out like, hey, you know, this is my level of comfort. I don't expect you guys to, you know, I don't expect everybody to do what I'm doing, but this is just where my level of comfort is. I hope that that's okay. And I think you're right. I think it's really helpful to call out at the start, this is awkward. I'm sorry, I don't know how to handle this. How would you like to handle this? Oh man. Well, and I also think the same thing can be really true when it comes to, like you said, kind of that small talk. If you're getting to more of a friendly relationship with a prospect or with a client, you know, kind of letting them set the tone for what they want to talk about in that small talk, you know, before the meeting gets started, right?
Totally. And know that I didn't mean to discount that at all, you know, in my response, but we can always fall back on some of those best practices that I mentioned and the reason why we're calling, right? And to let the client or the prospect set the tone, you can follow from there. So there's a bit of a adaptability that has to come on our end.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left in the chat. We've got a couple questions left that we haven't gotten to. So if anybody on the line has questions that they want asked, please feel free to come off mute, put them into the chat if you'd like, whatever way you'd like to participate, we are open for. All right, so this person had asked, what are some of the unexpected upsides you've seen since this pandemic hit? And do you have any advice on how we can rise to the challenges presented by this whole situation?
Yeah, I touched a little bit on this earlier. I mean, I don't know how to phrase this in a way that actually, you know, doesn't discount the seriousness of what we're dealing with, but really partnering with our clients to embrace remote work has been something. I mean, we've been so passionate about remote since the beginning, and now and have been like really trying to push clients to embrace it, because when we think about how are clients going to actually hire more women, it starts with reaching broader talent pools, right? Like there's only so many mid to senior level women software engineers in the Bay Area. When you open that up nationwide and even worldwide, right? That's when you start to really access more diversity. And so now that our clients are in a place where they're forced to have to go remote, we're able to step in and really help them, whether it's through training, right? Our training offerings and around how to manage a remote team, how to interact remotely, interview remotely, but then also, the pipeline that we can bring. And that's really important for PowerToFly too, because we're nothing without our community of women that we've built. I mean, the women that are on the line right now. And we partner every day with companies that really care about hiring more women, but we're in a place now where we're actually able to give more women opportunities because these companies are now hiring in different types of locations and not bound by geography or like they were before.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to kind of focus on, is that you're right. It's honestly opened up a much broader pool for a lot of these companies that maybe didn't think that they could get the kind of talent that they wanted if they looked outside the Bay Area, or didn't think that it was worth it to jump through the hoops of onboarding remotely and training remotely and all that kind of stuff. But when you're kind of shoved into that position where you don't really have a choice, the one thing that I've really taken away from this whole situation, like the dumpster fire that is 2020, like I've taken the idea that I might think that something's not really doable, but that's not actually true. What you have to reframe it and kind of think of it in terms of is, all right, what am I ready to give up so that I can achieve these other goals that I want to do? If I don't think that something is possible, what needs to change to make it possible? And can I do that? Is it within my control? Or is it like, because most of the stuff that you'll find that are kind of barriers or hurdles to this, they're really stuff that's within your control to do. It's within your control to decide, okay, well, I'm going to make this change or this shift to make to make something else happen so that I can reach that goal that I thought was unattainable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is just on the topic of control and what we can control and what we can't, the fact that we really are going through this as a collective, and that's unifying, and the vulnerability that it's also exposed. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm stressed out. I'm at home with my 3 kids doing homeschooling, not me personally, but just what I'm hearing from clients, right? Being vulnerable with each other because of what we're going through, actually, I think is another upside of this too.
Yeah, and you know what? It really goes back to one of your first points about like asking the right questions. Because I know that when this whole thing kicked off, I had a ton of people that were kind of reaching out to me and asking like, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I whatever? And it's really one of those things where you're right. We're going through this as a collective, but you're getting this peek into how everybody else lives their life and what their home life looks like, what their work situation now looks like after these shifts. And so it gives you, not only does it give you a little bit of a window into that person, but it allows you to like realize that your experience in pandemic, in quarantine, in lockdown, wherever you are, is not everyone's experience. So you're right. Like if you're asking those key questions of like, how are things going for you? What's your situation like right now? What's your business like? What's your personal life like? Are you, what kind of stuff are you dealing with that PowerToFly could maybe help with? Asking those questions opens up that dialogue and opens up that vulnerability, because it's not just you asking how the other person's doing in some situation that's maybe unique to them. You can fall back on that collective experience that we're all having. Be like, okay, here's how I'm handling it. How's it going for you? See, we've got a couple comments here. Oh, hey, Lydia.
Hey, I was also going to add that I do think people want to connect more with strangers now with everything that's happening. And so I think in sales, I mean, this is one of my first sales jobs also under Christina. So I'm learning a lot as I go. But I do think, it makes me happier to be able to connect with people. And I do think that as I am reaching out, I think they are more honestly or more authentically connecting because of everything that's happening, because we really all just want to be more connected now. And I think that that's something that we can use now. And that is why I'm trying different ways to approach people through LinkedIn, through videos, so they can see my face and connect a little bit more beyond just like the email.
Thank you, Lydia. Thanks for coming off mute too.
Yeah, thank you. All right, guys.
Time.
I know we've actually come to the end, and these always go so quickly. Christina, is there anything that you want to leave the audience with today, or anything that you wanted to share that we didn't touch on in any of the questions?
I just want to thank everybody that took the time to be here. A lot of PowerToFly team members. I really appreciate the support. I also see S and Monica and Bryn and Jessica and Kelsey, and thank you. And I hope you found this time to be productive.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking time out of your busy Friday to spend with us and share your insights and how your team's handling it. And thank you to the rest of the PowerToFly sales team that joined to show support. I know that it is always appreciated by our guests. So thank you for that.
All right, team, let's do it. Keep closing. Have a great day and a great weekend.
Have a happy Friday, guys. Looking forward to seeing you on an upcoming virtual event. Bye.
Bye.